Well, Bridget McKenzie is the Agriculture Minister and Deputy Nationals Leader. Joins me now. Thanks very much for your time this morning, Senator. Is the Prime Minister right? The Farm Household Allowance isn't welfare?
Well, David, I'm really proud of the Farm Household Allowance. I think you summarised it really well in that it is our government's way of directly supporting those farmers who are experiencing hardship. We commissioned a review of the payment last year that was handed to government early this year, and I've been considering those recommendations post-election and handed down our government's response to that review on Friday. So all 6 recommendations from the review that was actually chaired by Georgie Somerset, the chair of AgForce, the state farming organisation out of Queensland, who, you know, as we know, Queenslanders have been doing it tough for upwards of 7 years for this drought. So it really gave government a really good snapshot and understanding of the issues around the Farm Household Allowance, and we've responded to every single one of those recommendations through making sure it's going to be much more accessible to our farmers. We know from our own estimates upwards of 35,000 farmers across the country are doing it tough and are eligible to access this payment. So, but often when you get out into regional communities, there's sort of a discussion around it's really tough. They don't treat us like a business. You know, it's too hard. There's too many forms. It's too difficult. We've got to trust. You know, we've structured our business this way. It's not going to be able to happen. And so my message, and I think the Prime Minister's message to those farmers is, please put yourself forward. This is not a capped program. It is there on money on the ground for you and your family to get through tough times. And so we've got rural financial counsellors that'll sit at the kitchen table with you and work through it. Sorry, David.
OK, well, let's have a look at why some farmers may not be taking it up. I mean, the Prime Minister's probably right. There are some farmers too proud to put out a hand for help, but no doubt there are structural problems with the system, and this is what I want to get to that's stopping a lot of farmers here. One of the recommendations from this panel you mentioned, it said, the panel strongly believes that decoupling the Farm Household Allowance program from the Social Security Act will create a tailored program that should more effectively reach those farmers in financial hardship. So will this Farm Household Allowance be taken out of Social Security, out of Centrelink, and paid in another way?
No, David. What we've chosen to do is a partial decoupling and to actually go to the source of the problem, which are cultural issues, I think, within Centrelink more generally.
What does partial decoupling mean? What does partial decoupling mean?
We're making changes to how we treat off-farm assets at the moment. You can only have assets off-farm, for instance, up to $390,000. We're actually going to bring that into the $5.5 million asset threshold to be able to access Farm Household Allowance. So the way we treat off-farm income, for instance, we're making changes to, and we're making changes to how they have to report their income. Right now, they're having to report every fortnight, so there's a real variability, which halts their ability to reinvest in their business and therefore get back on their feet.
So how often will they have to report?
End of the year, we'll be doing a random and targeted auditing process, which is going to make it much more easier and reflect the fact that we're dealing with farm businesses that are making decisions on a daily basis, and we don't want those decisions affected by business decisions affected by how it's going to impact their payments.
But going from fortnightly to annual reconciliation, could there be the danger of big debts at the end of the year for farmers who may have underestimated their income?
No. We're actually looking at how that debt accrual will be looked at, and if you are eligible for $1 of assistance under Farm Household Allowance, under the changes that we'll be bringing forward in legislation, you'll be getting the maximum payment. So rather than it being the variability that's going on at the moment, that will be ended, which is one of the great sources of frustration, I think, for farmers out there when they're trying to focus on feeding
But you could still cop a debt, though, just to be clear on this. If you've underestimated your income and you're no longer going every fortnight to Centrelink but once a year, could you cop a debt at the end of the year?
We're not reconciling at the end of the year. We're using a format of targeted and random audits of those on Farm Household Allowance to actually
So how is it reconciled?
Well, it's going to be treated differently, more like the fact recognising the fact, as the review highlighted, that we needed to treat these farmers as businesses, not as traditional welfare recipients. That was one of the reasons they sought to decouple from the social security legislation. So
but is Centrelink still doing this
we're
work?
always going to
this
have
is the point. Is Centrelink the one still doing the work here?
Yes, and that goes to my second point, a raft of changes around how Centrelink itself interacts with our farming communities and making sure we've got a much more farmer-focused client case management approach. So they're not having to explain their circumstances to 20 different people. They're not having to sit on the phone for hours on end, which at the end of the day means they're not out doing what they need to be doing, making sure the stock are fed, etc., getting some off-farm income if that's what's required to keep the farm running. So we've taken the
just to be clear on this
recommendations
debt
on board.
issue, can Centrelink issue them a debt if they've had more income than they thought they were going to have?
So if they're assessed as being eligible for Farm Household Allowance, rather than it being paid on a sliding scale, if you're eligible for $1 of Farm Household Allowance, you'll be paid the maximum rate, which if you're a couple, which 80% of our recipients are.
What I'm asking about is whether you get a debt. If you underestimate your farm income,
no.
If you underestimate your farm income, you will not get a debt. No risk of that.
No. That's why we've changed it from this regular reporting to a random and targeted audit at the end of the
One of the other concerns farmers talk about is if they have to destock, right? The drought's bad, they don't want to have to kill their stock, so they sell it, but selling it can put them over the income threshold to receive the Farm Household Allowance.
Yeah, no longer.
What happens? What's going to happen? No longer. So this is a change as well.
No longer. So we're changing. So, for instance, some farmers may be looking at agistment as a way to raise some income. That was negatively impacting your payments under the former arrangement. That will no longer be the case. So we're doing a raft of changes around how we're going to treat on-farm, off-farm assets and income. We're also making sure that we tighten up our rural financial counselling service, which is there to actually support farmers make really good business decisions. So you're on it for 4 years.
And that's important, but just to be clear on this is a significant change. You can sell your stock. The income from that is not going to affect your Farm Household
Allowance. No.
OK. And just to come back to the first question here, is this welfare or not?
This is support for a key industry in the Australian economy. Australians very much understand that
a subsidy for an important industry?
Well, it's support for farmers because we know that our national economy depends on the productive capacity of our rural sector. And Australia has always stood by our regional industries, in particular our farmers and primary producers, when times are tough. One of the other changes we've made, David...
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry, I'll just jump in there because one of the important... OK, you go.
Yeah, thank you. Well, right now, Farm Household Allowance, you're only able to access that for 4 years in your entire lifetime as a farmer, which is just ridiculous. We know in this country every 2 decades we're going through a period of significant hardship as we are now. So we've made a change now that every decade farmers will be able to access this payment for up to 4 years, which really reflects the reality of primary production in Australia. And just finally,
but even on that, Minister, I mean, what if this change, as you say, means you can have it for 4 years every decade? There are farmers who've been in drought for 6, 7, 8 years. Why can they only get it for 4 years?
Well, David, we've made other changes right across the system, farm managed deposit schemes, etc., to help farmers and primary producers plan for the future. I mean, farmers aren't just sitting around, expecting the government to just step in when times are tough. They're running, world-class businesses in an environment where droughts and floods occur.
Are you saying you should get no more help?
We've got a range of other systems in place to help them prepare for, which is, in a country like Australia, a semi-regular occurrence. But when it does go on for in excess of a couple of years, that is time for state and federal governments to step up. And we have.
Yeah, but my question is, if you've been in drought for more than 4 years, and there are plenty who are, you get no more help.
No, the case is that the Farm Household Allowance is there, and this was another recommendation out of the review,
but only for 4 years.
That it's not a drought payment, it's actually a hardship payment. So we saw it handed out during the dairy crisis and also in issues of flood, is to actually help
for 4
farmers.
Years. I'm asking if you've been in drought longer than that, what happens? What happens if you're in drought for more than 4 years?
So at the end of your Farm Household Allowance 4 years, there needs to be decisions that you're making around, do I sell up? Is this something I want to do for the rest of my life? If not, we've got a package of support there to help you retrain.
So that's it. After 4 years, you should really look at getting off the farm.
Well, these are decisions business people have to make. So at the end of the 4 years of assistance, and we've got a range of financial counselling to help farmers make these decisions, do I need to succession plan? Or do I need to make system changes on farm to make sure I'm more sustainable going forward? And 89% of recipients of Farm Household Allowance have said that it has absolutely helped them improve, over that 4 years of counselling, improve their financial situation. And we know that nearly, I think, 40% of the 12,500 farmers that have accessed this payment over the last 4 years have actually gotten off it way before the 4 years, because of the structure around helping them structure their business better.
Do you accept there are some who've been on it 4 years and still need it?
I accept that when you're doing it tough, you're needing a range of support mechanisms. I don't accept your assumption, though, David, that as soon as a drought hits, that farmers need Farm Household Allowance on day one. Because to run a business in this country, you should be actually planning ahead for the fact that it is going to come again. We will have another drought, and that's why we've got, you know, farmers stacking away a lot of money in their farm management deposit schemes, etc., planning for that non-rainy day, which is exactly what they should be doing as world-class businessmen and women.
All right, just come back to this. It does sound a bit of a technical argument of whether this payment is welfare or not. If it's not welfare, if it is support or a subsidy, does that risk our free trade agreements?
Well, it's clear that it is a support mechanism, and we've got a range of support mechanisms, not just Farm Household Allowance, but as the drought continues, we're supporting the regional communities that underpin the agricultural production through, for instance, the $13 million announced on Friday to local councils who are supposed to be spending that money to ensure that small businesses in these regional communities are actually continuing to be viable.
None of this actually puts in jeopardy our free trade agreement obligations? No,
it doesn't at all. This is not an American, a US style farm bill subsidy program at all. And indeed, as an exporter of 70% of what we produce, we don't want to be doing anything here at home that puts at risk our ability to trade.
OK. A couple of other things. Dams, after being in government 6 years, a lot of talk about dams. Why aren't we seeing dams built yet?
Oh, look, this is one of the most frustrating topics, I think, as a National Party MP and somebody that cares about rural and regional Australia, to be a government that's been able to manage the economy well enough that we've got money on the table to build infrastructure out there in regional Australia that helps us to drought-proof for the next time, and to have state governments unwilling and, you know, unable to partner with us. The reality as a Commonwealth government is we just can't roll in, David, with our diggers and our graders and roll into a state and start digging. We have to have a partner in this, in state, because of sovereignty of states, to actually build the things. The money's on the table.
So when your colleague Susan Lee, your colleague Susan Lee says she's going to speed things up at the federal level,
good.
I mean, can that make any difference? And why hasn't this happened 6 years ago?
Well, David, you can only speed things up so far. At the end of the day, if you've got Lisa Neville here in Victoria saying no more dams, despite the CSIRO saying we should get on with it, if you've got Palaszczuk up in Queensland dragging her heels continually on Rookwood and other, you know, drought-busting infrastructure, and you get New South Wales finally coming to the table today with $84 million, which is fantastic news. The reality is we've been there the whole time, waiting. We can't roll in with diggers and start building these things. We have to partner with states. And I'd suggest that they stop trying to play petty politics, these two Labor states, being Victoria and Queensland, and get on with it. Let's think about our regional communities and drought-proof this nation.
Final one, the African swine fever has apparently been spreading globally, particularly in Southeast Asia. It's now been detected in East Timor as well. It's getting very close. How prepared is Australia for a potential outbreak here?
Well, we're doing everything we can to ensure that African swine fever does not reach our shores. It would decimate our 2,700 pork producers and the 34,000 jobs that go along with that industry. But more concerning is its impact on our pest and disease-free status. We're one of the few nations that doesn't have this disease, and we've seen China have to cull, 50% of their pork production. They've got a 10 million tonne deficit in protein, which is an opportunity for a country like us, but it's going to have repercussions for decades on trade. We want to keep our pest and disease-free status as a nation. It's one of our gold standard value propositions as an exporter. I know I'm doing everything as Ag Minister, and I know our states are too. We've been increasing screening of people and parcels coming in from affected nations, and just since we've started doing that, we've seen 27 tonne of pork, cooked pork product coming through our borders. So people are still disregarding our biosecurity laws. We can send them home. We can slap significant fines on them, and I'll be encouraging our biosecurity officials to be doing exactly that with those offenders who would risk our biosecurity, pest and disease-free status.